From censored homoerotic one-liners to authentic samurai swords slicing through bamboo, this buddy cop action flick hides some truly bizarre secrets behind its testosterone-fueled mayhem. Between studio butchery and explosive beer mythology, the weirdest details involve everything from church location recycling to international box office surprises. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Showdown in Little Tokyo. Fact 1. The famous penis line was originally racist. One of the most memorable and bizarre moments in Showdown in Little Tokyo comes when Brandon Lee's character Johnny Murata tells his partner Chris Kenner, played by Dolph Lundgren, "You have the biggest dick I've ever seen on a man," right before they head into their final battle against the Yakuza. The line has become legendary among action movie fans for its completely unexpected homoerotic nature in what was supposed to be a straightforward buddy cop film from 1991. However, what most people don't realize is that Warner Brothers actually censored this already outrageous line to make it even more shocking than what Brandon Lee originally delivered on set. According to production records and behind-the-scenes accounts, Lee's original line was, "You have the biggest dick I've ever seen on a white man," which would have made the comment specifically about race, rather than just a general compliment between partners. The studio executives at Warner Brothers decided during the editing process that the racial element was too problematic and potentially offensive, so they cut the word white from the audio track. This editing decision transformed what was already a strange moment of male bonding into something that sounds even more intimate and personal between the two characters. The irony is that Warner Brothers thought they were making the line less controversial by removing the racial component, but instead they created what many consider one of the most homoerotic moments in action cinema history. The edited version suggests that Johnny has seen many men naked and is making a comprehensive comparison, rather than just comparing Dolph's character to other white men specifically. This small change completely altered the context and made the scene even more memorable for audiences, though probably not in the way the studio originally intended when they decided to tone down the dialogue. Fact 2. Director lost control. After studio takeover, Mark L. Lester, who had previously directed action classics like Commando and Class of 1984, found himself in a nightmare situation when Warner Brothers completely took over the editing process of Showdown in Little Tokyo without his permission or involvement. Lester had delivered what he considered his final cut of the film, which ran approximately 90 minutes and represented his complete vision for this buddy cop action movie starring Dolph Lundgren and Brandon Lee. However, after the studio conducted test screenings and saw the audience reactions, Warner Brothers executives decided they were unhappy with the pacing and overall feel of the director's version. The studio brought in editor Michael Elliott, who had performed similar rescue editing duties on Warner's other 1991 action film Out for Justice, to completely restructure and speed up the movie. Elliott and the studio chopped Lester's 90-minute cut down to just 79 minutes, removing 11 full minutes of footage that included character development scenes, dramatic moments between Lundgren and Lee, more of the Nelson character played by Ernie Lively, and even a different introduction sequence for Lundgren's character Kenner. They also cut a scene that showed Kenner getting chewed out by his superiors after the opening gunfight at the underground boxing match, which would have explained some of the consequences of his violent methods. According to Lester himself, the studio takeover was so disappointing and frustrating that it completely changed how he approached filmmaking for the rest of his career. After seeing his vision butchered without any input or consultation, Lester made the decision to start financing and selling his own movies independently so that he could maintain complete creative control over his projects. This meant he would never again have to worry about studio executives stepping in and re-editing his films against his wishes, even if it meant working with smaller budgets and more limited distribution. Fact 3. The church was recycled from horror film. When Dolph Lundgren's character Kenner arrives at the crime scene to examine the decapitated body of Angel, the young woman who was killed by the Yakuza boss Yoshida, sharp-eyed movie fans might notice something familiar about the church building visible in the background of the shot. This particular church is actually the exact same location that was used 4 years earlier in John Carpenter's supernatural horror film Prince of Darkness from 1987, creating an unexpected connection between two completely different genres of movies. The building isn't just any random church that the filmmakers happened to find for their crime scene either, but rather a genuine historical landmark with significant cultural importance to the Little Tokyo community in Los Angeles. This church holds the distinction of being the very first Christian church ever built in the Little Tokyo area of downtown Los Angeles, making it a meaningful choice for a film that takes place entirely within that neighborhood. The building has witnessed decades of changes in the community and survived various challenges over the years, including major earthquake damage that required extensive repairs. After the devastating 1994 Northridge earthquake struck Los Angeles, the church building was seriously damaged and needed to be completely restored and renovated before it could be used again. Following the earthquake repairs, the historic church building was transformed into something completely different from its original religious purpose and became the Union Center for the Arts, where it now serves the community as a cultural venue rather than a place of worship. The fact that this same building appeared in both a John Carpenter horror film about ancient evil and an action movie about modern Yakuza crime shows how certain Los Angeles landmarks become popular filming locations that directors return to again and again, sometimes creating these strange cinematic connections that span different decades and genres. Fact 4. Only one sword was actually real. Throughout Showdown in Little Tokyo, there are numerous sword-fighting scenes and moments where characters wield various Japanese blades, from the Yakuza villains brandishing their weapons to Dolph Lundgren's character Kenner demonstrating his samurai training and skills. What audiences watching the film don't realize is that nearly every single sword visible on screen throughout the entire movie was actually a carefully crafted replica, made specifically for the production, designed to look authentic while being safe for the actors and stunt performers to handle during the intense fight choreography. These replica swords were created to withstand the demands of filming without the risk of serious injury that would come from using real sharpened blades during action sequences. However, there was one notable exception to this safety-first approach when it came to the sword props used in the film. The production team made the decision to use one genuine, authentic samurai sword for a specific scene where Dolph Lundgren's character Kenner demonstrates his martial arts prowess and connection to traditional Japanese culture by slicing cleanly through bundles of bamboo. This particular demonstration scene required the real cutting power and precision that only a properly forged and sharpened traditional samurai blade could provide, since replica swords simply wouldn't have been able to slice through the bamboo with the clean, effortless cuts that the scene demanded. The use of this authentic samurai sword was likely both a practical necessity for achieving the visual effect the filmmakers wanted and a way to add genuine authenticity to Lundgren's character, who was supposed to be an American deeply trained in traditional Japanese martial arts and culture. The contrast between using fake swords for the fight scenes and a real sword for the bamboo cutting demonstration shows how filmmakers balance safety concerns with the need for authentic-looking action on screen. Fact 5. Thanks in advance, Carrera used body double despite later Playboy. Thanks in advance, Carrera, who played the nightclub singer Minako in Showdown in Little Tokyo, was still a relatively young and inexperienced actress when she was cast in the film, and she felt uncomfortable with the idea of appearing nude on camera for the movie's hot tub scenes with Dolph Lundgren's character. At the time of filming in 1991, Carrera was not yet the established star she would become after her breakout role in Wayne's World the following year, and she was nervous about doing nude scenes so early in her career. Because of her discomfort with nudity, the production team hired a body double to perform the scenes where her character gets into the hot tub and becomes intimate with Lundgren's character, carefully filming these sequences so that audiences wouldn't be able to tell that it wasn't actually Carrera on screen. The interesting twist to this story comes from what happened years later in Carrera's career, when she eventually did pose nude for Playboy magazine after becoming a much more established and confident performer in Hollywood. When she was interviewed about her Playboy photo shoot, Carrera specifically mentioned that by that point in her life and career, she felt comfortable being nude and no longer had the same reservations about nudity that had prevented her from doing those scenes herself during the filming of Showdown in Little Tokyo. This represents a complete turnaround from her earlier position when she was too uncomfortable to appear nude even briefly in an action movie. The contrast between her reluctance to do nude scenes as a young actress and her later willingness to pose for Playboy shows how performers' attitudes toward nudity can change as they gain more experience and confidence in the entertainment industry. It also demonstrates how the context and circumstances around nudity can make a significant difference in how comfortable an actor feels about appearing without clothes on camera or in photographs. Fact 6. The beer tank explosion defies physics. During the climactic battle at the Red Dragon Brewery, Brandon Lee's character Johnny Murata creates one of the most spectacular explosions in the entire film when he casually tosses his cigarette lighter into a large industrial beer tank, causing it to erupt in a massive fireball that takes out several Yakuza henchmen in a dramatic blast. The scene is visually impressive and fits perfectly with the over-the-top action movie tone that director Mark Lester was going for throughout Showdown in Little Tokyo, but it also represents one of the most scientifically impossible moments in a film that already stretches believability to its breaking point. Anyone with even basic knowledge of chemistry or brewing would immediately recognize that this explosion simply could not happen in real life. Beer is composed primarily of water, typically making up around 90 to 95% of the liquid, with the remaining percentage consisting of various dissolved substances, including sugars, proteins, and most importantly for this discussion, alcohol. However, even the strongest beers rarely contain more than 12% alcohol by volume, and most regular beers contain between 3 and 6% alcohol, which is nowhere near the concentration needed to create a flammable liquid that could explode when exposed to an open flame. For comparison, most spirits that can catch fire contain at least 40% alcohol, and even then they burn rather than explode unless they're in vapor form under very specific conditions. The massive explosion that occurs when Johnny's lighter hits the beer tank would require the liquid to have an alcohol content similar to pure grain alcohol or gasoline, neither of which would ever be found in a commercial brewery. In reality, throwing a lit cigarette lighter into a tank of beer would simply extinguish the flame when it hit the liquid, since beer is mostly water and would put out the fire rather than fuel it. The scene works perfectly for the movie's entertainment value, but it completely ignores the basic scientific facts about what beer actually contains. Fact 7. Dead actor appears in next scene. One of the most glaring continuity errors in Showdown in Little Tokyo occurs during the early part of the film when viewers witness a Yakuza henchman dramatically break his own neck during an interrogation scene, presumably killing himself to avoid revealing information to the police. This moment is meant to demonstrate the extreme loyalty and discipline of the Yakuza organization, showing how far these criminals will go to protect their secrets and honor their code of silence. The actor playing this henchman performs the neck-breaking scene convincingly, and audiences are clearly meant to understand that his character has died from this self-inflicted injury, making it a memorable and shocking moment that establishes the serious stakes of the conflict between the police and the Yakuza. However, sharp-eyed viewers who pay close attention to the film will notice something very strange happening in the very next scene, where the Yakuza boss Yoshida brutally beheads the nightclub girl Angel after discovering her betrayal. During this subsequent scene, the same actor who just died from breaking his own neck mysteriously appears very much alive among Yoshida's group of henchmen, and the filmmakers even show his face clearly in close-up shots not just once, but twice during the beheading sequence. This means that audiences can easily recognize that the supposedly dead character has somehow returned to life with no explanation whatsoever. This continuity mistake suggests that the scenes were filmed out of order, and the editors either didn't notice or didn't care that they were using the same actor in consecutive scenes where his character should have been dead. It's possible that the production was working with a limited number of available actors to play Yakuza henchmen, leading them to reuse the same performer even though it created this obvious logical problem. The error is so blatant that it's become one of the most frequently mentioned mistakes among fans who have watched the film multiple times. Fact 8. Lundgren's gun-fired impossible shot count. During one of the most intense action sequences in Showdown in Little Tokyo, Dolph Lundgren's character Kenner storms into the Yakuza boss's house for a dramatic shootout where he takes on multiple armed henchmen while trying to rescue thanks in advance. Carrera's character Minako. Throughout this extended gun battle, Kenner wields his signature weapon, a powerful Desert Eagle 44 Magnum pistol, which is known for being one of the largest and most intimidating handguns ever manufactured. The Desert Eagle is a popular choice for action movies because of its impressive size and the dramatic visual impact it creates on screen, making it perfect for a larger-than-life character like Kenner, who embodies the over-the-top action hero archetype that was popular in early 1990s films. However, anyone familiar with firearms and their specifications will immediately notice a major problem with how this particular gun battle plays out on screen. The filmmakers show Kenner firing his Desert Eagle continuously throughout the shootout, unleashing a barrage of shots at the Yakuza henchman without ever stopping to reload his weapon. When viewers actually count the number of individual shots that Kenner fires during this sequence, the total comes to 17 consecutive bullets before he finally crouches behind a car to reload his pistol. The problem with this extended shooting spree is that a Desert Eagle 44 Magnum can only hold a maximum of 8 bullets at any given time, consisting of 7 rounds in the magazine plus 1 additional round that can be chambered and ready to fire. This means that Kenner should have run out of ammunition after his 8th shot and been forced to reload, but instead he somehow manages to fire more than twice as many bullets as his gun can actually hold. This type of mistake is common in action movies where the excitement of the gunfight takes priority over realistic weapon behavior, but it's particularly noticeable with such a distinctive and well-known firearm as the Desert Eagle. Fact 9. Hungary was the film's biggest success. While Showdown in Little Tokyo was considered a major disappointment and financial failure in the United States, where it earned only $455,192 during its opening weekend from just 140 theaters, the film found an unexpectedly enthusiastic audience on the other side of the world in Hungary. The movie's poor performance in America was so bad that it averaged only $3,251 per theater during its first weekend, which was far below what Warner Brothers had hoped for from their action movie starring 2 popular martial arts performers. The studio's disappointment with these results led them to give the film only a very limited theatrical release in most markets before quickly moving it to home video distribution. However, the situation was completely different when Showdown in Little Tokyo was released in Hungary, where audiences embraced the over-the-top action and buddy cop formula with much more enthusiasm than American moviegoers had shown. According to the 1994 Variety International Film Guide, which tracks box office performance around the world, the film managed to earn $197,590 in Hungary alone, which was enough to secure it the number 9 position on Hungary's top 10 box office grosses list for 1992. This success in Hungary was particularly remarkable because it meant that this single Eastern European country generated nearly half as much revenue for the film as the entire United States market had produced. Despite Hungary having a much smaller population and fewer movie theaters than America, the unexpected popularity of Showdown in Little Tokyo in Hungary demonstrates how different international audiences can respond very differently to the same movie, and how a film that fails in its home country can sometimes find success in markets that the studio never expected to embrace it so enthusiastically. Fact 10. Real martial arts master played the dragon. When audiences watch the climactic sword fight between Brandon Lee's character Johnny Murata and the Yakuza Lieutenant Sato in Showdown in Little Tokyo, they're witnessing something genuinely authentic in terms of martial arts expertise, because the actor playing Sato is actually a legitimate master of traditional Japanese sword-fighting techniques. Toshishiro Obata, who portrays the deadly Yakuza enforcer known as the Dragon, brought real credibility to his role because he wasn't just an actor pretending to know how to fight with swords, but rather a genuine expert who had spent years mastering multiple Japanese martial arts disciplines. His expertise in authentic sword combat made the final battle sequence much more realistic and impressive than it would have been with a typical actor who had only learned some basic choreography for the film. Obata's background in martial arts extends far beyond just knowing how to handle a sword, as he is recognized as a legitimate master of several different Japanese fighting disciplines that require years of dedicated training to achieve proficiency. His skills were so well regarded in the entertainment industry that he had already been cast in similar roles before appearing in Showdown in Little Tokyo, most notably playing the character Tatsu in both the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie from 1990 and its sequel, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. The Secret of the Ooze the following year. In addition to his acting work, Obata also served as an action choreographer and fight coordinator for various films, which means he was responsible for designing and teaching the martial arts sequences that other actors would perform on camera. This combination of authentic martial arts mastery and professional fight choreography experience made him an invaluable asset to action movies that wanted their sword-fighting scenes to look as realistic and impressive as possible, rather than the obviously fake combat that audiences often see in movies where regular actors attempt to portray skilled warriors. Fact 11. Entire cast had wrong ethnicities. The casting choices for Showdown in Little Tokyo created a situation where none of the main actors actually matched the ethnic backgrounds of the characters they were portraying, resulting in what could be considered one of the most mismatched ensemble casts in terms of nationality and heritage in action movie history. The most obvious example of this casting disconnect involves Dolph Lundgren, who is Swedish and was born and raised in Europe, playing the role of Chris Kenner, an American police officer who was supposedly raised in Japan and deeply immersed in Japanese culture from childhood. Lundgren's thick Scandinavian accent and distinctly European physical features made it challenging for audiences to believe that his character had spent his formative years living in Japan and studying traditional martial arts philosophy. The ethnic mismatching extended to the other main characters as well, creating a pattern of casting decisions that ignored the actual heritage of the performers. Brandon Lee, who was Chinese-American through his father Bruce Lee's ancestry, was cast as Johnny Murata, a character specifically described as Japanese-American who struggles with his connection to his Japanese roots. Similarly, thanks in advance Carreri, who is of Filipino-American descent, played Minako, another character written as having Japanese heritage and cultural background. This approach to casting reflected the Hollywood practices of the early 1990s, when studios often treated Asian ethnicities as interchangeable and didn't prioritize authentic representation when filling roles that required specific cultural backgrounds. The irony of these casting choices becomes even more apparent when considering that the film's plot heavily emphasizes cultural identity and the importance of understanding Japanese traditions, yet the main actors portraying these culturally significant characters came from completely different ethnic backgrounds than what their roles required. The mismatch between actor heritage and character background created an additional layer of artificiality in a movie that was already stretching believability in numerous other ways. Fact 12. Yakuza headquarters was Steven Seagal's nightclub. Movie fans who pay close attention to filming locations might notice something familiar about the building that serves as the Yakuza headquarters in Showdown in Little Tokyo, especially if they're also fans of other early 1990s action movies. The impressive structure that houses the criminal organization led by Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa's character, Yoshida, had actually appeared on screen just 1 year earlier in a completely different action film, serving as the base of operations for an entirely different type of villain. This same building was used as the nightclub owned by the Jamaican drug lord Screwface in Steven Seagal's 1990 action thriller Marked for Death, creating an interesting connection between two movies that otherwise have nothing in common except for their focus on martial arts and organized crime. The reuse of this particular location demonstrates how certain Los Angeles area buildings become popular choices for filmmakers who need impressive and dramatic settings for their action sequences. The building's architecture and interior layout apparently made it ideal for representing the kind of upscale criminal headquarters that both movies required, with enough space for the large-scale fight scenes and dramatic confrontations that are essential to these types of films. The structure provided the perfect combination of sophistication and menace that directors wanted when showing where powerful villains conduct their business operations. This recycling of filming locations was quite common in the action movie boom of the early 1990s, when studios were producing numerous similar films and often working with limited budgets that made it practical to reuse the same impressive locations rather than constantly searching for new ones. The fact that the same building could convincingly serve as both a Jamaican drug lord's nightclub and a Japanese Yakuza headquarters shows how versatile certain architectural spaces can be when it comes to creating the right atmosphere for different types of criminal organizations on screen. Fact 13. Dead body actor helped Lundgren lower him. During the infiltration sequence where Dolph Lundgren's character Kenner sneaks into the Yakuza boss's house to rescue thanks in advance Carrera's character Minako, there's a moment where he silently eliminates one of the guards by sneaking up behind him and breaking his neck with a quick, lethal twist. After performing this neck-snapping move, Kenner carefully lowers the supposedly dead guard's body to the ground, trying to avoid making any noise that might alert the other Yakuza members to his presence in the house. This scene is meant to demonstrate Kenner's stealth abilities and his efficient, deadly combat skills, showing how he can eliminate enemies without detection as he makes his way through the building. However, viewers who watch this sequence closely will notice a glaring mistake that completely breaks the illusion of the guard actually being dead from having his neck broken. As Lundgren's character begins to lower the guard's body down onto the wooden deck, the actor who is supposed to be playing a corpse clearly reaches up with his hand and places it on Lundgren's arm, obviously helping to support his own weight and guide his positioning as he's being laid down on the ground. This helpful gesture from the supposedly dead actor is quite visible on screen and completely undermines the believability of the scene. The mistake reveals the practical challenges of filming scenes where actors need to portray dead bodies, especially when other performers are required to move or carry them around. A truly dead body would be completely limp and difficult to maneuver, so it's understandable that the actor playing the guard would instinctively help support himself during the lowering process. However, the fact that this assistance is so clearly visible in the final cut of the film suggests that either the editors didn't notice the mistake during post-production, or they decided that the error wasn't significant enough to require reshooting the entire sequence. Fact 14. Film features Asian, American action star royalty. While the main cast of Showdown in Little Tokyo may have been mismatched in terms of ethnic backgrounds, the supporting cast and stunt performers included some of the most recognizable and respected Asian American character actors who specialized in martial arts films during the 1980s and 1990s. Among these legendary performers were Al Leong and Gerald Okamura, two actors who had built their careers playing memorable villains and henchmen in countless action movies throughout this golden era of martial arts cinema. Their presence in the film created what action movie fans would recognize as a true who's who gathering of the most famous Asian American character actors of the time period. Al Leong had already established himself as one of the most iconic bad guys in action cinema by the time he appeared in Showdown in Little Tokyo, having played memorable villains in major films like Die Hard, where he portrayed the terrorist Uli who steals candy bars during the Nakatomi Plaza siege, and Lethal Weapon, where he appeared as one of the drug dealers that Mel Gibson and Danny Glover's characters pursue. His distinctive appearance and martial arts skills made him instantly recognizable to action movie audiences, and his casting in Showdown in Little Tokyo added credibility and familiarity for fans who expected to see him in this type of film. Gerald Okamura was equally well known among martial arts movie enthusiasts, having appeared in dozens of low-budget action films where he typically played either villains or martial arts experts who would face off against the main heroes in elaborate fight sequences. His extensive filmography in the martial arts genre made him a natural choice for a movie like Showdown in Little Tokyo, where authentic fighting skills and screen presence were essential for the supporting cast members who would be involved in the numerous combat scenes throughout the film. Fact 15. Limited release due to studio shame. Warner Brothers' lack of confidence in Showdown in Little Tokyo became painfully obvious when they made the decision to give the film an extremely limited theatrical release that demonstrated how little faith the studio had in its commercial potential. Rather than providing the wide release that most major studio action films received during the early 1990s, Warner Brothers chose to release the movie theatrically in only a handful of carefully selected markets around the world. The countries that received theatrical releases were the United States, Mexico, Australia, France, Italy, Israel, and Hungary, which represented a very small portion of the global film market, and suggested that the studio was trying to minimize their losses rather than maximize the film's earning potential. The studio's embarrassment about the film was particularly evident in their decision regarding France, where they chose to release Showdown in Little Tokyo theatrically throughout the country but specifically skipped Paris, which was the most important and lucrative film market in France. This unusual distribution choice indicated that Warner Brothers thought the movie might be acceptable for smaller French cities and towns, but wasn't good enough to be shown in the sophisticated and critical Paris market, where film reviewers and industry professionals would be most likely to see and judge it harshly. For every other country in the world outside of these 7 selected markets, Warner Brothers made the decision to bypass theatrical releases entirely and send Showdown in Little Tokyo straight to the home video market in 1992. This direct-to-video strategy was typically reserved for films that studios considered complete failures or movies that they believed had no chance of succeeding in theaters. The widespread direct-to-video release meant that most international audiences never had the opportunity to see the film on the big screen, and it relegated Showdown in Little Tokyo to the status of a rental movie rather than a legitimate theatrical release, which significantly limited its cultural impact and box office potential.